There's a war going on right now. It's happening all around us, and sometimes even inside of us. It's a fight on a microscopic scale against some of the world's toughest enemies, deadly parasites, and these drug-resistant superbugs. So today, we're going to take a look at the front lines, the weapons we're using, and what's really at stake for all of us. And if you want to know what's at stake, just look at this number, 405,000. In just 1 year, that's how many people, most of them little kids, were lost to malaria. This isn't some historical problem. It's a devastating crisis that's happening right now. So, that's the big question, isn't it? In a world that's just teeming with these invisible invaders, what does our counterattack even look like? What tools do we actually have in our medical arsenal? And, maybe just as important, what are the risks of using them? Okay, so here's our game plan. We'll start with the parasite behind malaria and the drugs we use to fight it. Then, we're going to dive into the world of parasitic worms and their treatments. And finally, we'll look at our last line of defense against modern superbugs, and wrap it all up with the most crucial piece of the puzzle, patient safety. First up, one of the oldest and deadliest diseases humanity has ever faced, malaria. So what is it exactly? Well, malaria is caused by a tiny parasite called Plasmodium. It's not a virus, it's not a bacterium, it's this little single-celled organism that basically hitches a ride inside Anopheles mosquitoes, which then pass it to us through a bite. And what makes this parasite so successful is its incredibly clever two-stage attack plan. First, there's the tissue phase. This is like a silent invasion. The parasite gets into your liver cells and just starts multiplying, and you don't feel a thing. But then it launches the erythrocytic phase, bursting out into your bloodstream to invade your red blood cells. That's the all-out assault that causes those classic, miserable cycles of fever, chills, and sweats. So, how do you possibly fight back against an invader that's so sleeky? Well, let's talk about our counterattack, the anti-malarial drugs. For a very long time, one of our go-to weapons has been a drug called chloroquine. You can think of it like a saboteur. It gets inside the parasite and just gums up the works, basically preventing it from copying its own DNA. If it can't replicate, it can't continue the invasion. It stops it dead in its tracks. But, this kind of power comes with a price. Antimalarials are serious drugs, and they can have some pretty serious side effects. The problem is, they aren't perfectly targeted. While they're busy attacking the parasite's cells, they can sometimes affect our own cells too, leading to anything from an upset stomach to really severe problems like vision damage, hearing loss, and even kidney impairment. And this brings up one of the biggest risks in any treatment: simple human error. Just look at these two names. Quinine, that's the antimalarial, and quinidine, a heart medication. They look almost the same, they sound almost the same, but mixing them up could be catastrophic. This is an absolutely critical safety issue. Okay, let's pivot. We're going to move on from single-celled parasites to something a little bigger. We're now entering the world of helminths, which you probably know better as parasitic worms. So these are multicellular organisms, and they usually get into our bodies through contaminated soil or food, which is often a result of poor sanitation. Once they're inside a host, they survive by feeding on its tissue. It's a huge global health problem, especially in parts of the world that don't have easy access to clean water. And we're not just talking about one kind of worm here. They fall into 4 major groups, from tapeworms and flukes to roundworms that can set up shop in your intestines or even in deeper body tissues. This diversity is exactly why treatment has to be specific. You've got to use the right drug for the right worm. So when you're faced with this whole menagerie of invaders, what's the medical response? Well, let's look at the drugs designed to kick them out, Anthelmindex. Anthelmindex are drugs made specifically to kill or help the body get rid of parasitic worms. And here's the really good news. The treatment is usually super short. We're talking 1 to 3 days. And because it's so quick, the side effects are often pretty mild, like some dizziness or an upset stomach. All right, for our final act, we're turning to a threat that isn't a parasite at all, but a crisis that, frankly, we helped create: the rise of the superbug. For decades, we've leaned heavily on antibiotics, but bacteria are absolute masters of evolution, and our overuse of these drugs has basically trained them to resist, creating these incredibly formidable superbugs, things like MRSA and CRE, that our standard antibiotics just don't kill anymore. So what do we do when our main weapons fail? We have to call in the heavy artillery, peptides. These are our last line of defense. They're powerful, broad-spectrum antibiotics, and they work differently. They act like biological hole punchers that literally shred the bacteria's protective cell membrane, causing it to fall apart and die. But using them is a really high-stakes trade-off. For instance, a drug like colistamate is great against dangerous gram-negative bacteria, but it comes with a high risk of damaging the kidneys and nerves. Bacitracin works on different bacteria, but can also harm the kidneys and your hearing. The bottom line is that these drugs are lifesavers, but they have to be used with extreme caution. And that brings us to the most practical part of all this. Whether we're talking about malaria or worms or superbugs, how do we use these powerful drugs safely and, better yet, prevent infections from happening in the first place? So let's reframe this. Let's make it personal. If you or someone you care about ever needs to take one of these medications, what is the stuff you absolutely have to know? First things first, expect very close monitoring. Because of all the risks we've talked about, the medical team is going to keep a really close eye on things. That means checking your vision and hearing, monitoring how well your kidneys and liver are working with lab tests, and sometimes even tracking your heart's rhythm with an ECG. And here's what you can do. First, and this is so important for stopping drug resistance, always finish the entire prescription, even if you start feeling better. Taking the pills with food can help with any nausea, and simple stuff like really good hand washing is a powerful way to prevent getting infected again, especially with worms. And of course, if you notice any severe side effects, you need to report them right away. So we end right back where we started, in the middle of a battle. From the two-phase attack of malaria to the evolutionary arms race against superbugs, these microscopic threats are always changing their strategy. And the question that leaves us with is a big one. Are our defenses, our science, our medicines, our public health habits evolving fast enough to keep up?